Oh,
Listen,
all right. Hello, everyone. It is I, Janita Spencer. I am the founder of BAGS, being a grandparent support. And I'm coming on to kind of briefly talk to you for a second before I introduce this phenomenal guest and brave guest that I have with me this evening. One of the things that about BAGS being a grandparent support, we support and provide information, resources, education, connection for grandparents in three target areas. Grandparents who are raising their grandchildren. Currently, BAGS is operating out of North Carolina, and it's over 90,000 children that have been placed with their grandparents. And in fact, what's happening today, grandparents are becoming are having food insecurities because they can't really afford to take care of their grandchildren. When it comes to food stamps and things of that nature, if they're 25 cents over as a household, they're not able, even though they need the help. And then the second group of grandparents that we provide support to are grandparents who are cut off or estranged due to not having relationships primarily with their adult children, be it where the spouse says it's either me or your parents, or either an argument has occurred with their adult child and they have decided to ghost their grandparents. And we want to rebuild those relationships and bring them back together through mediation. And then the third group that we work with are grandparents who are entrepreneurs. That is a growing. In fact, 59% of new businesses are people over 55 years of age. And so we want to educate and help them to be sustainable and excellent entrepreneurs by knowing the ins and outs. But this evening, I want to come back to our first group. Our first group is grandparents who are raising grandchildren. They're really going through a lot. They are experiencing some emotional things, and they are now starting to open up. But we want them to know that they're not alone. Just besides grandparents, we are also aware and partnering with kinship programs. You may have heard the word grandfamilies. Grandfamilies is a key word used for anyone who is stepping in and raising a relative. In fact, the last statistics that I saw, over 440,000 children have been placed with aunts and uncles. Yeah, aunts and uncles who are stepping in and to provide that support when the parent just can't do it for one reason or another. And so this evening, I'm going to be talking with a special guest because we actually started talking about this before. And when she started telling me about some of the things that she went through, her emotions, her experience, her feelings, it was almost like me talking to my grandparents. So I'm really excited to understand that kinship care and grandparents raising grandchildren really have a lot in common. So I'm going to welcome Miss Tina McDaniel, who I'm saying is a lovely, brave individual who's going to kind of talk. So this is kind of a free flow thing. There's no particular script or anything. Tina, thank you so much for your willingness to come to BAGS, being a grandparent support, and just share some of your experience because you are one of those grand families. You have been there. You have done kinship care. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself and just kind of start wherever you like to start.
okay, sure. Thank you so much, Janita, for having me. So I am Tina McDaniel, and I live in Bristol, Tennessee, so part of the Appalachian region. And I currently work for a nonprofit. I'm retired in terms of my career. I am a retired human resource professional, but currently work for a nonprofit. And our focus, we're called the Appalachian Promise Alliance, and our focus is on ACEs and trauma-informed care, also parenting, and we have a workforce sustainability program. But ACEs is really a big topic and a big part of the program where I work. And it's really about making sure that children have caring, supportive adults, because we know that that's really important in terms of building resilience. So what BAGS does is like so important and so critical, and I can relate it to the work that I'm currently doing. So that's my introduction. So Janita, if you would like for me to just kind of jump in to my story, because I certainly resemble that kinship program that you're talking about.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll jump in. So a few years back, my family faced a crisis where my two nephews, one 15, one 10, and then a niece who was 14 years old. Um, their their father, who is my brother, was deceased, and then their mother was incarcerated.
Mm,
So we were kind of faced with, okay, what are we going to do? Because we didn't want the children to end up in the foster care system. And as you know, that sometimes this is a pattern, because the children had been in situations where my parents, who were grandparents, took
mhm.
care of them for a while. Then we had some good years and everything seemed to be stable for them, and then they ended up in the situation where their mother was incarcerated, and they were facing being turned over to the court system and then ending up in foster care. So my husband and I made the decision that we were not going to allow them to be a part of the foster care system, that we were going to step in and take care of them. And we knew, partly it was because we knew my parents, the grandparents, really just couldn't do it. My dad was ill, and that would have just been way too much for my parents. So we kind of stepped in, and we didn't know exactly what that meant. We just knew that we didn't want the kids to end up in the foster care system.
Yes.
So we went to the court hearing. We were awarded custody of the children,
Mm,
and then the reality just kind of set in. It's like, oh my gosh, what in the world have we done? We were overwhelmed, because it wasn't something that, you know, I was at a point, well, my husband and I were at a point where, our son was in high school. We had kind of planned out how we were going to, be supportive of him and enjoy, his final years in high school. We were going to go on these college visits. And I mean, we had our life kind of planned out as to what,
yes.
as to what we were going to do. But everything changed.
Mm,
um, we were overwhelmed. We had these children showing up, at the court. They had no belongings.
mm,
They had nothing. That they had no clothes other than what was in the. It was a trash bag, literally a trash bag with what little bit of belongings they had.
mm.
So we take them, to our home. Well, guess what? Our home, it was not. We weren't equipped for three additional children,
Right.
so we didn't have the furniture. um so we had to go out and not only buy clothes, we had to purchase furniture and make sure that they had a place to stay, a bed to sleep in,
Mm,
um clothes on their back, other than you know what was in that trash bag, and there wasn't a whole lot there. But the more we kind of started thinking about, oh my gosh, this is just like overwhelming, because life as we had planned it, had changed.
yes. Yes.
It just changed, and I just remember um, the day that we brought them home from the court. I We were just like overwhelmed, and I remember going to my sister-in-law, and I said, my husband and I, it was her brother. It's like Billy and I, we just need to get away and to kind of process what's happened. And she took care of the kids for a weekend. I guess we were gone maybe a day or two. And I remember getting in the car. We had no plans on where we were going. We knew we were going to the ocean, because that's what kind of gave us peace. So we got in the car and we drove 6 hours. I don't even know if we really even had a conversation with each other, because we were just so kind of just kind of paralyzed by, uh, how our life had changed. So we drove all the way to Charleston, went straight to the beach, parked the car, and then just got out and then just kind of walked up and down, because it was just a huge decision, a huge change in our life, and our plans, as we knew it. So yeah, I just remember that feeling of just being very overwhelmed, at what we had undertaken.
But Tina, what was your thoughts? I know you. I mean, what were you visualizing quickly that okay, we got this, or were you feeling like, oh my gosh, should we do this? I mean, because I hear some grandparents, in that situation saying, "Oh, they're just my grandkids. I can do this," but then when the reality hit, they're not going anywhere.
Hmm.
This is not a come visit and then you go.
Hmm.
And their thoughts, they say, change.
Yeah. So we, in our hearts, we knew what we needed to do. We knew what we wanted to do. Okay. And
Yeah.
that was to make sure that, the children were safe and that they were in a good environment and that they were taken care of. That sounds all good, but then whenever the reality hits, you ask me the question of, did you feel like you had this? No. 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 I don't think we were ever at a place where it's like, we got this. Because
Mm,
this was, I'm the kind of person who likes to kind of think things through, kind of plan things. And this was kind of like, this was like, and I hate to say that the children were a disruption, because they weren't, but it is a
it
disruption in terms of your life as you knew it, and how things changed, because there were things that we needed to navigate that we had never navigated before. The Department of Children's Services, having regular
mm,
meetings with them, didn't know that was going to be a part of it. And one of the children, we just kind of adopted him as our nephew, even though it wasn't my brother's child, but I didn't want him to be separated from
mm,
his siblings. So I consider him to be my nephew, because he really never had that relationship with his father. Well, because we were tied up in this court system, um, then the court system was going after child support for his father. Well, guess
mm.
what? I end up having to leave work and go to court periodically for this child support, process. And, of course, they never are able to locate the father. But that's just, an example of some of the things that, you know, we weren't familiar with.
Yeah.
Um, and even, food stamps, we had like an EBT card, I think is what we called it. So just even, navigating that, you know and really not knowing what resources were out there,
Yes.
to really support us. So it was just like we kind of learned by accident. We didn't have anybody that we could just pick up the phone or reach out to say, hey, how do I do this? And then I think a part of it too, um, I will say, is that sometimes there's a little bit of shame associated with what's happening in your family, and
What I hear.
necessarily
Heard
want
that.
other you don't want other people to know your business and what's going on. So it's kind of like, how much information do I really want to share, and what are people going to think of me? So I think there are like stigmas associated with that,
With
um, as
grandparents.
well. But it was just a totally, overwhelming experience for us. In our heart, we knew it was the right thing. We knew that's what we wanted to do, because we didn't want the children to end up, we all almost kind of, felt like, what's that going to look like if I allow my, nephews and my niece to go into the foster care system whenever I have the means, and can take care of them, even though it's going to be a disruption for, my life, my plans, and all of those things. So
Did
I
it
learned that it
change?
wasn't about me. It wasn't about me.
How did it change your family's routine? Because I know you say you all have things kind of planned and stuff, and then all of a sudden you're getting up and going to bed, and you're Monday through Sunday.
So
How
think about it, Janita. I just had one, we have one child, one son in high school, and he was pretty much at a point where he was self-sufficient. Well, my gosh, now I have a 10-year-old. So I'm going, you know, um, we had to get up in the morning and make sure the kids had breakfast, that we took them to school. Um, so it uh, you know, sometimes we would eat out quite a bit. Well, we didn't do that anymore because we went to the grocery store quite a bit. So, buying groceries, preparing meals, uh, eating meals that sometimes we skipped. So it wasn't enough just to have a bowl of cereal whenever. So, it was just it changed everything.
now with your son being in high school, I'm sure that the discipline techniques that you use, you no longer had to use anymore.
Well,
So what happens with your new relative, your little niece and nephew, and they're growing and they're having their emotional, and that's what I'm hearing from grandparents. How do I handle their emotions? You share?
yeah, and their emotions were there. I remember my niece did not want me disciplining, her siblings. So there was her, kind of challenging me on, whenever I would correct them. Um, so, there was kind of this is pushback. It's like, you're not my mother.
Mm,
You're not my mother. So of course, really kind of earning their respect and trust took some
trust.
took some time, because they had been in multiple different situations where maybe people took advantage of them. I know that they had lived in from home to home, so this was kind of a pattern. So for them to trust that we weren't going to treat them the same way, that we weren't going to kind of boot them out and then they end up with the trash bag going somewhere else. So really kind of saying, we're here, we're letting them see something that would be consistent
Yeah.
and stable was
Yeah.
important in building the trust.
Now, could you have some of the things I hear sometimes is that you touched on this about feeling shame, feel embarrassed. Now that you've gone through that experience, if this was to happen again, would you have that same feeling of shame, or would you be more of a person that say, okay, this is what it is, and we're going to need some help, or would still probably be the same?
No, I don't think it would be the same, because I don't want to struggle like I did before
Mm,
when I don't have to.
yeah,
So at the time, everything just happened, just so quickly. So it wasn't like you had all this time that you could kind of plan and think about, where the resources are and there was no time for that. It was like, you know, one day we're in court, then, in a few hours they're coming, to our house. So we really we had no time really to prepare for it. And I think about, the shame and the way that I kind of felt about it. I think if I were to do it again, I'm like, that was not serving me well, to have those emotions. I get it. I understand it. You know, um, their pride in family, and for somebody to view us in a different light, that was kind of concerning to me. But now it's kind of like, what, we just do what we need to do, and find out what resources are available. Now that I know about bags, I know that an organization like bags would be a wonderful resource. And then really just having at the time, we didn't really have like a support system of people that we could talk to and say, hey, this is kind of what's going on. What did you do? Or nothing like that. So it almost kind of felt isolated. Um,
Mhm,
you were
mhm.
kind of doing what you needed to do, but then there was this kind of feeling of, is anybody else out there with me kind of going through this same scenario with their life? And, who are they? Um, it would have been nice to have had something like that so that, you know what, you're not alone.
So what advice would you give grandfamilies that they get the knock on the door, they get a call, because that's what most of them say. You know, they get a knock on the door saying that with the police department in their door, in their door with a social worker saying someone gave us your name, these are your grandkids, or either they get a call from social services and they go get their grandkids. What advice would you give them if they have this experience to? I guess it's hard to just say be ready because you're never ready, you know.
Hmm.
But is there anything that if this happens to you that it should be like the first thing you should do or the second thing, what advice would you give these grand families that you say if I'd have known I'd have done different?
I think, and I guess it just depends on the situation. If the
Right.
grandchildren show up at your door, I mean, who's going to turn the grandchildren away, right? You're going to do what you need to do. But if you know that there's a decision that needs to be made, I mean, I would reach out to maybe an organization such as yours to say, hey, this is what's going on. Can you direct me to someone that I can talk to so I can kind of navigate and know what what I need to do first of all, because there's a lot of red tape involved in child custody, things that I did not know anything about. So really just going to someone who can direct me to resources that can help me at least make sure that I have some support structures in place, that I know what I need to do so that I have a little bit of a roadmap.
So you're saying don't try to do this alone.
I say absolutely. If you don't have to, don't do it alone because um, I mean, why do it alone whenever there are
Don't let
resources?
shame keep you from reaching out and getting what you need, as well as the grandchildren or the niece or the nephew, that support. Because it's tough. It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah, and I think for me, it was, I, I don't know if shame is something that other people have felt, and then it's like, I'm a little embarrassed reaching out to resources that I've never utilized before. Um, you know, some of that, but at the end of the day, I had to realize that it's not about me. It's about, what's best for these children. And then whenever I look at my two nephews now, and I look at my niece, and all of them are working, they're thriving.
Yes.
Um, they
Yes.
take care of each other, and then I think about, okay, what would have been the flip side of that had we not taken custody and stepped in at a time whenever it was needed? I mean, what would their lives have been like? So, I just, thank God that, we had the opportunity to, support them and to pour into their life at a time whenever it was really needed. I have this one story that I remember about my nephew. So I tell him now that whenever he came to live with me, that his GPA in high school was in the negative. Uh, I mean, it was like negative. It was about as how low can you go? I mean, that's what his GPA was. And I remember he played football, and we found out that he was really struggling in his algebra course. So what we did is we got him a tutor. So every morning he was supposed to meet with a tutor before school actually started. So we thought everything was just going along really well, and that, he was doing well with his tutoring. Well, then my husband ran into the tutor and said, well, how's my nephew? I was going to say his name. He'd kill me. I said, how's he doing with his tutoring? And then the tutor kind of looked at my husband like, well, he hasn't been here. And
Oh,
and it had been several weeks. So from that point on, my husband would go to school with him every morning at
mhm.
7:30, and he would sit right beside of him in that tutoring class. So he went from an F to an A in
Ooh.
algebra. And then he, ended up graduating high school. He got a football scholarship. He made all state for Tennessee, and he did really well. And I just think that kids just need to know that you care, and sometimes you got to be a little tough and do things that they may not appreciate. Because I'm sure that he didn't appreciate my husband showing up with him in that tutoring class. But now we talk about it, and he is very thankful that my husband did that. And I know a couple of times my husband couldn't be there, so then I went. So it's really just showing up and being there. And I don't think that that was something that they were used to. Somebody really showing up and showing that they care and being there, even though it may not be something necessarily that they really wanted to see. Um, but it showed that we cared. And I think it is something that they will never forget. And I have a very close, both of us have a very close relationship, with them now. And I love, how the siblings take care of each other. So I'm just really thankful to God that he, at the time, maybe I wasn't thankful. Maybe I was a little resentful and, some of that. But now looking back on the situation, I'm just very thankful.
Yes, yes. Wow. Wow. Tina, wow, you have hit on so much that the grandparents and other, that are going through raising their grandchildren. And as we share this with others, I really hope this helps our grand families. In fact, I know it will, to know they're not alone, that those emotions are normal emotions, but to hang in there, to stick in there, but most of all, to get support, to get support. And that's what BAGS, being a grandparent support, is. You don't have to be a grandparent to participate, to volunteer. BAGS is always looking for sponsors. We're always looking for partnerships with organizations. And it's such a worthy cause. It really is. And kinship care, grand families, please, wherever you live, wherever you stay, get involved, be a support. Go on our website, www.bagsgoodlife.org, and you can get involved and follow us. Tina, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I just love you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for
Oh,
inviting me.
tell everybody I said hello and
Okay, I will.
good evening. Bye bye.